Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And oh my gosh, you know how busy entrepreneurs often have these multiple worlds that they are in, or they have side gigs that they're doing, or whatever. Well, my worlds are colliding for this program because I am obviously the host of the Business Power Hour. I have my own marketing and PR firm, but I am also studying to be an integrated cancer coach. And so I am absolutely delighted today to have the founder of that program on our podcast. So please join me in welcoming Kenan to our program today. Welcome, Kara. How are you?
Oh, I'm well. Thank you so much, Deb, for inviting me to join you today.
Perfect. I love it. And is it Kara or Kara? I said it wrong.
Kara.
Kara. Okay, I got it right.
Yeah.
So let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Kenan is the founder and CEO of the Cancer Wellness Institute, where she trains and certifies cancer coaches globally. A passionate advocate for cancer survivorship, Kara has developed evidence-based programs that empower patients, survivors, and health professionals. She also serves as the executive director for Going Beyond the Pink, a North Carolina-based breast cancer support group and nonprofit. She is also the marketing and communications manager. See, I tell you, we got all these hats on. The marketing and communications manager at the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. Kara is actively involved in cancer policy and advocacy with NCCS and the Society for Integrative Oncology, and has been a treatment guideline reviewer with the American Society for Clinical Oncology, ASCO. Leveraging AI, she has created and scaled her online courses, enhancing accessibility and support for cancer coaches worldwide. With over a decade of experience in coaching, advocacy, and curriculum development, Kara is dedicated to bridging gaps in survivorship care through education, innovation, and policy work. Whew, holy schmoly. You know, I have been just very, very taken with you since I started the program, and impressed. That was the word I was looking for, because it is an extremely well thought out program. But you clearly done quite a bit in your life. So before we jump into this in detail, how is it that you got to where you are today?
Deb, I blame my mother because as a young girl, she told me I could do anything I wanted to do. And I believed her. And
because she was right.
You know, I really heard that message. It really resonated with me, and I'm nothing if not stubborn. So I think all through life, I have really just identified gaps and seen things that needed to get done and thought, I can do that. Mom said I could do that. So, and then off I go, right? And so I actually started my career as a college English professor and writer, and just really loved that work. And I think that was an important part for me because as a teacher, I learned a lot about building curriculum and, being able to help people learn. I don't think that we teach so much as we facilitate learning. Right. And so for myself to learn how to do that, and to do that in an engaging way that really sets up an environment for students to excel. And that was a really important thing for me. And it's kind of echoed through all of the work I've done since. I was in the military, in the Air Force Air National Guard. I served in Iraq. In that role, I taught, if you will. I briefed air crews and worked with search and rescue. And so this line of teaching is really kind of a very common thread in all that I've done. And in 2013, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that just really woke me up
Mhm.
to a whole other world
Mhm.
of need.
Mhm.
And all of the things that I needed as I was going through the cancer experience,
Mhm.
I realized there weren't really programs or resources and things
Mhm.
available. And I just thought the whole time, well, I'm going to get through this and
Mhm.
I'm going to figure out a way to help other people. And
Mhm.
so many of the cancer survivors that I have known throughout the
Mhm.
years feel the same way, right? We
Mhm.
want to
Mhm.
give back so that someone else doesn't have to
Right. Mhm.
experience all of the same
Mhm.
hardships that we have.
Mhm.
Make it easier for the
Mhm.
next ones to come down the line, right?
Mhm.
Because we know that they're coming.
Mhm.
Cancer is prolific.
Right. Mhm.
And so just using that experience, recognizing gaps, kind of making the mental notes,
Mhm.
is kind of what brought me to the next step, which was initially just going to be a website. And then through connecting with people in my community, turned into what is now Going Beyond the Pink, which is
Mhm.
a local nonprofit organization
Mhm.
that supports the breast cancer community. And we're in southeastern North Carolina.
Mhm.
Um, and, we started out kind of thinking about health and wellness and
Mhm.
how can we support people with their health literacy and learning through all
Right.
of that. And I say we because there were just others in the community that were like, yeah, let's
Mhm.
do this. Let's
Mhm.
do this together.
Right.
And so, we built this organization. We started having workshops. It was really great. And then another community member came out and said, you know what? We need financial assistance that helps people that, are
Mhm.
kind of in the gap where other
Mhm.
financial
Mhm.
assistance programs don't help. So they funded it and we started, going
Wow.
forward with
Mhm.
that. And it was just kind of one piece
Mhm.
after another,
Mhm.
really everything just meshed and fit in. And so then the organization grew and grew. And yeah, and so and I got to continue to teach because what
Mhm.
I learned, I could then
Right.
implement and help
Mhm.
others
Mhm.
learn. And for me, that resonates because I don't believe you have to be a guru or an expert to
Mhm.
be able to teach and help
Mhm.
others. I
Right.
think that, if you think about it as rungs on a ladder, if you're
Mhm.
here, reach back and help someone
Mhm.
get up there
Mhm.
with you, right?
Right. And then you
And
both reach up to the next one.
and then you both reach up,
Mhm.
right? And you continue that trajectory. And
Mhm.
so that style really resonated. It helped me to grow the organization
Mhm.
to where it is today. And at this point, we serve not only our local, like 3-county area,
Mhm.
but also have a national footprint because
Wow.
of a lot of
Mhm.
the online health
Mhm.
and wellness
Mhm.
programming that we do. So it's fantastic, and that's really impacted a lot of
Mhm.
people. And what I found was I was doing a lot of coaching
Mhm.
in that area, right?
Mhm.
People would come in, they were newly diagnosed.
Right.
I would coach them through. It was kind
Mhm.
of a mix of patient navigation and
Mhm.
coaching. And so that kind of really led to the next step was kind of
Mhm.
pursuing this coaching career and
Mhm.
realizing that health coaching has been around for decades
Mhm.
and
Right.
they built out of the same thing,
Mhm.
right? There was really a need and a gap,
Mhm.
and someone just said, okay, let's fill
Mhm.
that gap. And they got together with other people, and it was that same kind of
Mhm.
momentum that happened. And they've built an entire industry, and
Mhm.
it's a global
Right.
industry,
A
and it's
billion dollar industry.
billion-dollar
Mhm.
industry, and
Mhm.
it's fabulous, right?
Mhm.
So many people are getting help, and
Mhm.
that's in the one-to-one models, that's in your group coaching models, that's through books and speakers
Mhm.
and conferences. There are so many ways to do it, right?
Mhm.
And it just took the creativity of, a small group to say,
Mhm.
let's fill this need and do something
Mhm.
about it. And they've grown an industry.
Mhm.
So, as I was doing the work and, experiencing a little burnout and realizing that I wanted to have a larger impact, but really couldn't do that on the one-to-one in
Mhm.
the way that I'd wanted,
Mhm.
I really started looking at, the coaching industry and started
Mhm.
researching what about cancer coaching? Who out there
Mhm.
has expertise in this area? And really, there wasn't anything. It
Crickets.
was
Crickets.
crickets, absolute crickets.
Mhm.
And so I recognized that there were a few programs out there. They were very heavily based on that the creator's experience.
Mhm.
And
Right.
I'm the first one. I mean, I built a nonprofit out of my experience. I'm
Mhm.
the first
Mhm.
one to say your lived experience is valid and
Mhm.
useful and can
Right.
help other people. But for me, there needed to be more. And I think
Mhm.
this is where the kind of the research
Mhm.
and my earlier work as a college educator, right, that came in and said,
Mhm.
okay, where's the evidence base? Where
Mhm.
where does that lie?
Mhm.
And so I spent close to a year really doing a lot of research and
Wow.
building out a
Hmm.
curriculum so that if I were to go out and offer something
Hmm.
and deign to teach others
Hmm.
to do what I was
Hmm.
doing, that it would be largely based in evidence
Hmm.
and then kind of supplemented through lived
Hmm.
experience. And recognize too that I'm not the only one with lived experience,
Hmm.
right? A
Hmm.
lot of us have that. And
Hmm.
so um, people can come to this work and use their experience and frame it and lay it upon a
Hmm.
foundation of the evidence, right? That supports
Hmm.
things like health
Hmm.
literacy and self-management
Hmm.
skills, and know that all of those
Hmm.
together help improve
Hmm.
outcomes. And I saw here in the United States, coaching is a really effective industry,
Hmm. Hmm.
but because of the way that our healthcare system is set up, we don't see a lot of insurance companies, things like
Hmm.
that, paying for coaching. And
Right.
so it
Hmm.
is very much something that is accessible to the privileged.
Hmm.
And those that aren't quite as privileged maybe can get access through their local hospital
Hmm.
system
Right.
rarely,
Hmm.
or through nonprofits
Hmm.
and things like that,
Hmm.
right? And so thinking through how do we build that out? How do we make it more robust?
Hmm.
But then also looking globally, right?
Hmm.
Because coaching in areas where you have high expat communities, right,
Hmm.
where they don't have big support systems, or where you have kind of centralized healthcare
Hmm.
systems, then coaching is just it's doing so well. And like you said,
Right.
it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of opportunity to be
Hmm.
had. And for me, that's a really sweet spot.
Hmm.
If you think about a burgeoning niche,
Hmm.
right? Where there's so much potential. There's not a lot of people functioning in that space.
Hmm.
And the scalability of it is
Hmm.
just phenomenal. So if I
Right.
can contribute to that and
Hmm.
help to build out, I mean, I would love to see it build out to a space like health coaching has,
Hmm.
but cancer
Hmm.
coaching, there's significant need. I mean, just in
Hmm.
the United States alone, there's over 18 million survivors
Hmm.
and more every year
Right.
because
Hmm.
cancer has become a very
Hmm.
survivable disease.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of need.
Hmm.
There's a huge gap in people that are able to meet that need,
Hmm.
and there weren't any businesses out there that were
Right.
providing this
Hmm.
curriculum, right?
Hmm.
And so to me, that was a sweet spot.
Hmm.
And that's how I got where I am today, was just
I
really
love
seeing
it.
those gaps
Hmm.
and working to fill them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was really astounded when I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
And many years ago, I worked for the American Cancer Society,
Mhm.
and I still think that they are one of the best providers of information. And that's, typically where I send people when they say, hey, what about it? Check with ACS. That's when, because they're reputable, right? They're
Yes.
not, because there's a lot of interesting information out there.
There sure is.
um
Yeah.
and I also worked for an oncologist in his office. I was not a medical person, but but he very much formed the basis of how I feel about all of this, because he very strong, and this was over 35 years ago,
Mhm.
he very strongly felt that information was the key to somebody surviving. And he would
Yeah.
tell people, and I mean, we still don't have doctors that say this. And this man was saying this over 35 years ago. He would say 99% of this is in your head. He would say, if you think you're going to survive, you will survive. If you think you're going to die, you will die. Now, that process might take years,
Mhm.
but it was, how were you living it during that time? And we had patients who, when he would explain everything, and they would say, no, I'm not going to do it. And as long as he felt that they were educated on what their decisions meant, he was fine with that.
Mhm.
And I remember we had a Native American man who came in one time and had a very large tumor removed, and then we packaged up his records and sent them back with him, and he gave them to his medicine man.
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened after that. We never heard from him again.
Mhm.
But he felt that was the best thing for him.
Yeah.
And that was really what struck me about that. And then I became the patient, right? So 2015 was when I was diagnosed. Now, I love my doctors. The doctors I don't like are gone.
Yeah.
Not to say there's anything wrong with them. They just didn't mesh with my style. And let's be honest, I kind of have a little different style. But it was very interesting because one of the things that people tell me frequently and have, back from 30, 35 years ago, is that when they're going through this journey, no matter how many people they have around them, they still feel very alone. And I think a big part of that is because they don't know where to get information. They don't know who to trust for the information. I firmly believe that our medical care providers are truly our superheroes, right? But they are very, very busy people.
Yes, they are. And they really have to use that time to focus
Yes,
on the
right.
disease and the treatment and not everything else that
Right.
the cancer
Right.
affects. Yeah.
And even when they say, "How are you doing today?" they don't want that full story. Well, and I shouldn't say it that way. It's
Yeah.
not that they don't want it, they don't have time for it.
Yeah.
And that comes back maybe to our healthcare system, right? They're told you will see X number of patients in an hour, all of these various things. And so there really is this gap. And it's funny because I have a fabulous business coach. I've talked about her numerous times on the program. Her name is Kathleen Caldwell. And 3 or 4 years ago, she kept telling me, you need to do more than business. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to be cancer girl. Blah. But then I realized, doctors would call me in when they would have students. They would
Yeah.
call me in when they had new patients, all of those various things. And maybe it was just something as simple as, like explaining, when we'd have a group of students in the hospital, what the pink band on my arm meant.
Yeah.
Because they would also, and they almost to a person, these delightful young little students would say, well, it means you have breast cancer. Pink, right?
Pink,
And
yeah.
yes, and I would say, no, it means this side has something wrong with it, and you can't do blood pressure or pokes on that side. Right. Yeah. And they had no idea. And so, but we would turn it into fun, right? And things. And so I was doing this, but every time Kathleen pushed me, I pushed back. I was like, ugh, no. And then coming back from San Antonio at Christmas, I was thinking, maybe I should be a cancer coach. I mean, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, like where the term even came from, right?
Yeah. And so, out there in the middle of nowhere in Texas, I was Googling it and found virtually nothing.
Okay.
It's exactly what you said. And really it was, I found maybe 5 programs.
Yeah.
Several are very closely tied to a much bigger, like, psychology degree, right? Or social work. So it's hundreds of hours worth of practice, things like that. And then there were the ones that were the 2-hour courses. Not to dissuade anyone about, because I've taken 2-hour courses too,
Sure,
to do
there's absolute benefit in that, but is it really what you need to underpin an entire career move?
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I came across Cancer Wellness Institute and saw that yours is a 12-week program.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that really impressed me was, okay, they're going to go into a lot more detail than just kind of flinging information at us and hoping we're okay.
Yeah.
And, so, then I started thinking about this and again, then I started Googling cancer coaches. More crickets. Now, just because they don't have a website presence doesn't mean that they don't exist. But yeah, very few could I find. And part of it, they might call themselves something different, all those various things.
Yeah.
But my mother told me that I was a bright young kid.
Yeah.
And I saw the opportunity. And it's funny because I lost my mom last year, and I think she'd still be going, "You're doing a what?" But she would say, "Okay, you go for it." But yeah, it's and so that's for anybody who's looking at something. In marketing, we're taught fill that pain, fill that need.
Yeah, meet the pain point. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's what really struck me about this was it's a new industry. And what I was thinking was, okay, let's get in at the ground level with a reputable program.
Yeah.
Now, it's not like the AMA has certified it. Maybe at some point, who knows,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
things like that. But it is still a very well thought out program. And I love that you mentioned that it was a year to kind of do this, because I think
Mhm.
so many times people think I can do that, but then they don't know really what to do. So, and then you decided, hey, you were going to make it global, which,
Yeah. Well,
that's,
yeah.
and now granted, English is, at least to some degree spoken in most countries.
Yeah, all over the world.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But, what really did, how did you think, okay, let's do this online,
Yeah.
and, and then really develop this curricula out?
Yeah. Well, so when I finally launched the curriculum, it was right at the beginning of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So online was really
It
the
had to
only
be
option.
online,
It
right?
had to
Mm-hmm.
go that way.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had been researching and like mentally building
Mm-hmm.
out everything and drafting and all the things,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't build the curriculum
Mm-hmm.
until I'd actually already sold the curriculum.
Ooh, I love it.
Because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't about to do a build it and they will come
Mm-hmm.
model,
Mm-hmm.
because if they didn't come, number one, I think my spirit would have been a little
Right.
crushed, but
Mm-hmm.
two, I am a busy person, even
Mm-hmm.
back then, just
Mm-hmm.
constantly, involved in so
Mm-hmm.
much advocacy work and
Mm-hmm.
volunteerism and building a nonprofit and
Mm-hmm.
my family and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. So I did not want to put in the remaining time I knew it was going to take to build it out for delivery
Mm-hmm.
until I knew I had to deliver
Mm-hmm.
it. And
Right.
so I did kind of a test cohort.
Mm-hmm.
I had 5 students in that cohort. We did a live online delivery through that,
Ah, okay.
which was great because prior to each one, I would build out, I would have the
Mm-hmm.
everything ready for them. They
Mm-hmm.
would go through it. We would meet and talk through everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, I would have them submit questions so that I could directly answer those questions
Okay.
as they were coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
that helped me to finalize the
Mm-hmm.
curriculum and to see where maybe there were some
Mm-hmm.
gaps before I did a more
Mm-hmm.
public offering, which
Mm-hmm.
was great. And even then, I mean, I had one of the students was from Canada, another from
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, and then the other 3 were here in the
Mm-hmm.
States. And so that was a great way to start. And it really put a fire under me to
Mm-hmm.
deliver,
Mm-hmm.
and also gave me an opportunity to really refine
Mm-hmm.
everything. And then at that point, I knew the live delivery model wasn't fitting well with my lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
really, right? I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of demands on time. I needed
Mm-hmm.
to think through other
Mm-hmm.
alternatives. I didn't have the time to go through live launching and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
They're hugely effective, but
Mm-hmm.
also hugely time
Mm-hmm.
consuming.
Right.
And I really wanted to build out a business that was going to help me to meet kind of the lifestyle wants and goals and just, what I wanted to get out of it too. That was going to
Mm-hmm.
suit me. I wanted my business to work for me, not the
Mm-hmm.
other way around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I came across kind of this evergreen model
Mm-hmm.
and then built in live support
Mm-hmm.
sessions
Mm-hmm.
so that you kind of get the best of both worlds,
Right.
right? You have asynchronous
Mm-hmm.
online delivery, which gives myself and students a lot of flexibility.
Right. We
So
can
like
do it at midnight on
exactly.
Saturday if we
Whenever. You
want.
can do it
Mm-hmm.
on your phone when you're traveling. You could do it on your
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? Any lifestyle, it fits. And like you said, it's a 12-week
Mm-hmm.
program, but you get up to a year.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, particularly in
Right.
that
Mm-hmm.
program, a lot of survivors come to this work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I call them wounded healers.
Mm-hmm.
They see what they didn't have and they want to put it out into the
Mm-hmm.
world. And so they come to this work and they really need the flexibility because things
Mm-hmm.
happen to cancer
Right.
survivors. It's not over when
Mm-hmm.
treatment is over,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so giving them that flexibility where they
Mm-hmm.
have the time they need to take it, and that suited me well, it
Mm-hmm.
suited them well, and so it was just a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
But yet I still got to have that live
Mm-hmm.
connection with students on online
Mm-hmm.
calls. And that was a thing that's offered as an additional support. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a core part of the
Mm-hmm.
program, which then gave me flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, last year I had a really challenging year with personal things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Health things,
Mm-hmm.
family things, a lot of
Right.
stuff going on.
Life.
Right, life happens,
Mm-hmm.
and it happens to me as the
Mm-hmm.
business professional as much as it
Mm-hmm.
happens to the students,
Right.
right? So that I had that flexibility, but then when I had the time to pick back up into it and go, I could just go. And it wasn't, I didn't have to have all these kind of blocks of things that were just, it has to be this way. And if isn't, it's going to fail. I just wasn't willing to let it fail. So I had to figure out that flexibility that it worked.
Right.
And so online was the only way to deliver it. And it has worked out really, really well. And then you mentioned the global part. So I'll just kind of jump into that if you don't mind. Like you said, that there was crickets out there when it came to cancer coaching, but it is coaching in general is more established in the UK, and even places the Middle East and India. There's a much bigger presence there. And I actually had a wonderful partner reach out from the UK and say his curriculum partner in his cancer coaching business had they parted ways, and he needed someone to come in with a curriculum, and could we find a way to work together to broaden my program over there and extend it there, and then help support his needs and his gaps too. And so we worked out a great contract that's worked out really well for both of us. And in that, I was able to get the program approved for continuing professional education through existing health coaching organizations. So the UKIHCA, which is the largest health coaching provider in the UK. So they reviewed the program, and this was a huge win for me, just personally. When they reviewed the program, they said it was such an excellent program. They've never seen anything that was so in depth that it could be a health coaching program that would, compete with any of the other ones that were out there, but that the focus on cancer was really needed, and there was such a huge gap, and they were so excited to bring us on for that. So that was great, and it helped me, new in this industry, to really build the confidence I needed for the next step, which was then I looked at, where many of my students were coming from were still, again, in UK and abroad, because the model's not built out as well here in the States. And so I thought, I'm going to build that out first before I turn back and focus on the States. And so then I reached out to HCANZA, HCANZA, which is New Zealand, Singapore, Australia, and went through the same process, right? So they reviewed and approved the curriculum, again, to just resounding applause about how strong the program is. And so now the program is certified by both organizations, and people can earn continuing education if they are already health coaches, and through ICF as well, right? So then you've got kind of, most of the world out there has that stamp of approval that says, yes, this is an excellent program. And so now refocusing that back into the States and kind of approaching. So this year I'll be getting that same approval here in the States for continuing education. And so it's both available to new coaches with no experience in a longer format, and then a shorter format for experienced health coaches who recognize the gap and the need to have additional training in this niche, right? And so the growth there has been wonderful. And then even just recently this year, a health system in California reached out that they've been using health coaches in their heart center to improve outcomes. And their cancer center realized, the improvement in outcomes was so significant that the cancer center said, we need health coaches. How do we bring this in? And they said, you don't need health coaches, you need cancer coaches. Because it is different enough, right? The needs of the cancer community are different enough. And so, they reached out to us and they said, we want you to train the coaches. And so now that's moving forward there.
Cool.
And that kind of woke me up to another need, right? A lot of people are not, they're not at their best in learning in an online environment, no matter how accessible you make that. And so in the next year and a half, we are going to be doing live training courses all over the world. And London is up first. So if you're out there watching from London, you can look for us in August.
I love it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that insurance and all of those are some with coaching weird things, but in a way that's a good thing, because there's a whole bunch of different criteria, and especially, state by state, country by country, all of those things. And you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And it's funny because one of the things that I have been working on for all of my materials is my disclaimer. Right. And
Yes.
I'm big on you have a disclaimer. And
Yes.
so, AI and I have been working hard on that.
Good.
But in essence, I'm saying I am not a healthcare provider. I am not a trained therapist, all of those various things.
Yeah.
And it, to me, it's that we bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And it's different than a social worker. And it's funny because I've met with my social worker at my cancer clinic several times. I'm never quite sure why I think it's just on their calendar, meet with this person every 6 months. And so she and I chat, and it's really funny. One of the times they changed one of my drugs just from one manufacturer to another, same drug, just different.
Yeah.
And they made they made her come talk to me. And I was like, okay, well, my oncologist said to do this, and she's the boss of me. So,
that's why I'm doing it right now.
And as long as, and since she had suggested it, I was perfectly fine with it. And the funny thing is now I'm back on the original, but yeah, it's, and I think the thing is that, especially with something serious like cancer, we need so many different things, and we're not even really sure how many different things we need. And some people don't need much. Some people need a whole bunch. And I have obviously seen cancer care change over the years to where it is much more a combination of Western and Eastern philosophies. We talk about doing yoga, nutrition, all of those things that 35 years ago would have never been mentioned. And I still, one of the things that annoys me about where I live is I can't get acupuncture. It's just not really something that is, and I used to get it all the time in Colorado. But massage therapy, physical therapy, all of those things now ties in. But then we don't have any idea who to go and all of those things. And of course, no one person, one clinic even can cover all of that. And so that's where, sometimes this comes in, because then we get the paralysis by analysis. You type something like this in Google and your computer blows up.
It's true.
But, but what I like about your program, and a lot of programs like this, is then it is tailored to the person who's giving it. You and I have talked about this. My focus is going to be on working with business owners and executives who have been recently diagnosed, or maybe they might be several years down the road, or even a long ways down the road and still dealing with it. But because those are my people, right? This is the C-suite network that we're on. But someone else might focus on and I've talked to some of the other students, mothers who are dealing with this, or whatever it is that is our niche. And you talk about that in the program, is we have to find our niche. If you just say, I'm going to help everybody with cancer, well, first of all, you can't, because there's a bazillion of them. And we talk about that on this program a lot, the fact that we have to find our niche. We are not serving everyone.
That's right.
You just can't.
I mean, you might have the heart to want to serve everyone, but you cannot possibly do it, and you won't get clear on your business until you know your audience.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't know what your message is. My message is, are you a busy, overworked business owner who now has this other thing they've got to worry about? And I think it'll be interesting as we record this. I have yet to complete your program. I'm very close.
So you're close.
But I think it'll be interesting to see, is this a group of people who are going to discover that their priorities change? Because I think for all of us, really, we do think about it different. But is this going to be this person who was working 80 hours a week who's going, nope, not going to do that anymore? Or whatever it is. So that's going to be kind of the interesting thing, is to see kind of how that comes out. But I think that's where we're the most successful, is when we pick that passion that fits us best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, so much of what you just said really resonates. And I think about it in terms of the program, but I also think about it in terms of my own life and my own experience, right? When I was an English teacher, I taught from a book called The Call to Write, and I chose that book because it's so similar to that call to action, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And in the marketing side of things,
Mm-hmm.
we know that that is a necessity. You
Mm-hmm.
have to give someone a call to action,
Mm-hmm.
or they just kind of whoop.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of
And use
the
them.
almost always forgotten things.
It is
Click that
absolutely.
button, make that call, whatever it
It
is we're
is,
telling
yeah.
them. Mm-hmm.
But just when you're thinking about building a business and we're talking about getting clear on your audience, the call to write talks about things like the audience, of course, your purpose, your context. All of that applies in a situation where you are looking at who is my ideal client, right? It's not everyone. I don't have the desire to work with everyone. I want to work with this gender, this age range, this disease state, whatever it is, right? That varies. And even just within cancer, there are so many niches. I think about breast cancer, people think about breast cancer as one disease. It's actually 10, right? I mean, there's so many different kinds.
And then you toss in men.
Right, male breast cancer, right? And then you think about advanced disease states or early breast cancer, all these different things, right? There's postpartum breast cancer, which nobody's ever even heard of at this point. There's all of these different kind of subspecialties that you could think about. And so to think that you could be broadly effective across all different cancer types, to the unique individual needs that cancer patients, survivors have. It's just too grand, right? And you're not going to be able to build out an effective business. I've been really lucky to work with some wonderful students who, and this is the other thing too, the students aren't just coming into Cancer Wellness Institute to learn how to be a cancer coach and then go off and disappear into the ether, right? Like I said, I see cancer coaching becoming the juggernaut that health coaching is all over the world.
Right.
And so in order to accomplish that, we have to build networks. We don't exist in isolation, and none of us will be successful if we cannot build a profession around what we're doing. And so when students are finished, they go into the CWI Insiders. They'll continue to get access to course materials and updates and templates. But the biggest and the most important part is the building of community, right?
Yes.
It's the leaning on one another as you're getting started. It's I've dealt with this really difficult situation. How would you have done this? Let's share a case study, right? It's the building of a profession, which will eventually lead to the building of oversight, right? And profession-wide standards.
Right. Which is a good thing to be going towards.
Is a good thing, right? Because then it means that we build credibility. We build the authority as a profession that we need to be successful. But that doesn't mean you have to do it just this way, right? I have students who do a retreat model, right? I have a student in Mexico who has built out a beautiful business doing retreats because she lives where people want to vacation. And that's hugely successful for her. Then I have others who go into kind of that individual one-on-one private practice model, other students who've gone to work with health systems, others who want to write a book or be a professional speaker, right? There are so many different models where you can have impact. You still have to get clear on your niche. Who are you serving? Who are you speaking to? It's so critical.
Right. Yeah, I've shared this story on the program several times, many times probably, where I was at a networking event, and it was just, regular business networking event. And you go around, you tell your 30-second spiel, right? Yeah. And this person sold healthcare, lotions, things like that. Okay. And so, one of us said, so who's your audience? And she said, well, everyone. Which everybody has skin, right? And so that was kind of
easy to be like, yeah, everybody, everybody.
But we all went, and so I talked with her a little bit, and several of us did, and we got her to figure out that what she wanted to focus on. And of course, the hardest thing is you're thinking, but there's all these other people that I could be helping. Yeah. Well, maybe. And if so, they'll find you. Don't worry. It's okay. They'll find you if you're the right one. But why spend your time if they're not going to buy? And so what she said was she wanted to sell healthcare products to 16-year-old boys who had acne. Every single person went, know somebody, right? Now, we might have also said, oh, I know a girl, or I know a 20, something like that, some variation. But the second she figured out what her niche was, then we could refer to her and she could refer out, which is what I love about your program, because there might be somebody who comes to me that's just not a good fit for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And all of those reasons are usually very positive, right? You mentioned, somebody might want to do retreats. I'm not going to do a retreat.
Right.
They
somebody want to do individual and you want to provide online.
And so by having this network, we can refer out comfortably.
Yeah.
And that, this person is going to be able to provide them with the care and support that they need.
Yeah.
And, that's the other thing that I think I see with business people is they think, oh, I have to be in this little silo and I can't ever refer out. Mm-hmm. I've had people when I've mentioned, that, well, like I'll say, I referred so-and-so to so-and-so. They're like, you gave away business. Yeah, but it wasn't the right business.
Yeah.
Could I have done it?
Yeah.
Probably. Would I have liked it?
Yeah.
Would the client have liked it? That's, because I wouldn't have been 100% committed to doing it. So it would have shown.
Yeah.
And so, finding that niche is just so important. And, I mean, that's why doctors specialize. I mean, all those things, even your general practitioner is a specialist.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think too, you mentioned like with doctors, right? They're all specialists. They all spend they focus their time in on one particular kind of practice. And when we seek them out, we seek out ones that are really good at their specialty, right? Because that's how we know we're getting good care. So of course why wouldn't we want to be that too, right? Be specialized, really focus in on what you're going to be able to provide and then do it really exceptionally well.
Right.
And if you can't, have the confidence enough to say this isn't a good fit, right? And I've done that. I've had student or people who wanted to take the program, and during our discovery call, it was just clear that they were, maybe one student or one person was really still very much in an emotional space where she would have benefited from taking the course in helping.
Yeah, she should have been on the other side.
She needed to be on the other side or spend more time getting to a space. And I would not have been comfortable saying, giving her a certificate to say, you've accomplished this and it's and go out in the name of Cancer Wellness Institute and do this work, right? We are, we just all have to do this together and build this community. It's so important. And that we do it with integrity and leaning on each other. Yeah.
Right. And it is about, finding what works, and like you said, admitting, hey, this one's not going to work, which is hard, but the funny thing is we all know it, right? We feel it in our little bones. This is just not quite working right, but somebody told me I should be doing this. And it's funny because my business coach and I have been laughing about that. And I was on a call with her last week and she said the exact same thing. She said, you realize 3 years ago, I told you should be doing this. And I said, yes. And she said, right. And she said, but it was clearly not the right time.
Yeah.
And that's what it really came down to. And like I said, driving out across Texas, there's nothing else to do. So I'm playing on my phone. I wasn't driving. It's okay, folks. But as you were saying, that the other pieces have just fallen into what you do at the right time. And it's really hard and really scary to have the faith that things like that will happen. And then we do have, you mentioned those fun little words, imposter syndrome, who's going to pay attention to it? More importantly, who's going to pay me?
They're all going to know that I'm a fraud. I don't know anything. Right. And now because we come to it with this idea, we've got to be the guru or the expert. And once you can realize you're contributing, that's all. You can do that.
Right. Yeah. And I got the cancer patient part down pretty good. I mean, I got that part down pretty good.
Darn near guru at that.
I know, and it's really funny because, and I actually wondered this of you. I will go with people sometimes when they don't have someone to go with them. And I, one of the big things, and I have always said this is, I hated COVID because we couldn't do this. When you're going for your first appointments where you're getting the icky, nasty news, and they're throwing so much at you and your little brain shut off before you ever made the appointment, right? Take somebody with you
Yeah.
And so I have gone with people on their appointments. And now and it's always entertaining because we have to explain who I am and why I'm there. But and I never say anything unless I feel like I need to, or based on the guidance from the person. They might have said, "Hey, I want you to jump in anytime," or make sure I answer this question, things like that. But more than once, I have had the medical provider say, "Are you medically trained?"
Yeah. I get that
And
all
I'm
the
like,
time. Yeah.
"No, I'm just a perpetual student.
Yeah.
You're a perpetual patient."
Yeah.
But that comes back to a big part of what I tell people is we absolutely positively have to advocate for our own care.
Yes.
And I think that's a big part of your program is giving people the tools so that we're telling people this is what you need to be doing. You need to be asking all of those questions. Years ago when my mother-in-law had breast cancer, I went with her and she hadn't told anybody. I mean, not her husband, not her kids, nobody. And I went with her. And that was when I was working for the American Cancer Society. And her doctor was this delightful young man who tells her, "You're going to have a mastectomy." And she goes, "Yes." And we got home and I said, "Do you know what that means?" And then we had tears, because she didn't question doctors,
Yeah.
and we still see that. I mean, I still do that on
Every
occasion.
day. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny because I just got a text from my husband who said, he was at the doctor and he said, "Now I've been sent for this and this and this," and I felt like saying, "Did you ask why?"
Yeah.
Okay, you're sending me to do this, why?
Yeah.
But and it's not bad that we have that blind faith in our medical care providers, but we still have to say why. What is the reason that we're going to do this? What outcome are you wanting to find? What are we ruling out? Right, that's probably one of the better things. But yeah, it's about how, what is that information that we need to get to make sure that we have the best care. And one of the things, I mean, I was very, very seriously ill for quite a long time, and so my husband was that advocate, and he was the one who made sure to be asking those questions and doing all of those things because I was just not there. And so and I think that's the other. I mean, I mentioned it, that people feel alone. Sometimes people really are alone, and how can we help them? Even from afar. That's the thing about online. They might be halfway around the world, but how can we help them and how can we support them?
Yeah. And it's really interesting to me because there are so many tools available now, right? You can
Mhm.
call in when somebody's in an appointment. You
Right.
can video
Mhm.
in when somebody's in an appointment.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can ask permission to record it so you can share it with people
Mhm.
after, right?
Mhm.
And it's different depending on the
Mhm.
physician that you're in with and
Mhm.
whether or not they are okay with that.
Mhm.
Um, I would say, just harkening back to, ascribing the authority
Mhm.
to physicians.
Mhm.
Um, the one thing I will say is that not all of them stay up to date the way that we hope
Right.
that they do.
It's
And
a
again,
huge amount of information. Mhm.
absolutely. And a lot of conflicting
Mhm.
information, and
Mhm.
that takes time, and they don't have the
Right.
luxury of time,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm
Mhm.
not saying that as a negative
Right.
to
Mhm.
providers,
Mhm.
no ill will there,
Mhm.
but
Right.
um
But yeah, if I go in and say, "So I've heard this new bee fruit juice is,"
they're
they
not
might
gonna
not know
they
about
are
the bee
yeah.
balm fruit juice.
Absolutely. They also might not know about, ongoing clinical trials in
Mhm.
their area of
Right.
specialty because they
Right.
are so
Mhm.
focused in
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
what they're doing and they have
Right.
such a
Mhm.
demand from their
Mhm.
structure to
Mhm.
get so much done,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So the more you can do to
Mhm.
be an advocate, to,
Mhm.
goes back to
Mhm.
knowing, right? You said
Mhm.
the oncologist that inspired you, right? Just the information is the key.
Mhm.
I'll refer over to National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship,
Mhm. Mhm.
NCCS, who I also work with.
Mhm.
They do a survey every year, and
Mhm.
every single year it turns out that advocates, right? People that
Mhm.
are connected in with NCCS,
Mhm.
that are
Mhm.
doing advocacy work, that are advocating for themselves or
Mhm.
within their community for others, are more informed and are more critical of
Mhm.
their health care and have better outcomes, right?
Mhm.
Because
Right.
you are
Mhm.
engaged.
Mhm.
Being engaged is
Mhm.
key. Here's a number that gets me every time, and I'm going to get on a high horse and I'll try to keep it brief. In the United States, health literacy levels are so critically low that only 12% of adult Americans can understand the information that their healthcare providers are telling them and then implement that into their lives.
Right.
And that is really scary if we
Right.
know that information is what makes the
Mhm.
difference in outcomes, right? So coaches, navigators, people in the system that are in the know, like the more you can get and connect with those people, you're going to live longer for it, right? And so, yeah, cancer coaching is such a critical
Right.
need for that reason alone.
Right. You know, and I always tell people, you know, if you go to the doctor when you have the flu, you come home and you go, when was I supposed to take that medicine?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
you go in when you are told you have cancer or some other big life altering type of diagnosis, your brain really did shut off.
Yeah. I'll
You
tell
know,
you, when
yeah.
I was going through the diagnosis process and I
Mhm.
was sitting in there and we didn't know exactly what treatment I was going to
Mhm.
need yet, but the idea that radiation was going to be part
Mhm.
of that, right? So the doctor said something about radiation and my brain, and I mean, this is the most critical doctor's
Mhm.
appointment I've
Mhm.
ever had
Right.
at 35 years old,
Mhm.
right? She says radiation and my brain starts singing the Imagine Dragons radioactive song. I didn't hear another
Mhm.
thing she
Mhm.
said.
Mhm.
So thankfully, there were other
Mhm.
people in the room paying
Right.
attention and taking
Mhm.
notes,
Mhm.
right? Because
Right.
I would have missed all that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and you know, one of the things that I love about my practice that I go to, and it's a big practice. I mean, it's you know, it is a huge practice here in Georgia, but on the door of every exam room, it says, "Do not leave this room if your questions have not been answered."
Bingo. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. You know, and I've been known to call them back in
Yeah.
or to text, you know, and that's the nice thing too, is there's so many different ways to communicate with folks.
Yeah.
My endocrinologist is, you know, I'm probably old enough to be his mother, but he loves the online messaging system.
Yeah.
And he will respond usually within 2 hours. I mean, it's incredible how
That's
fast
really
he
impressive.
responds.
Yeah. You don't see
Yeah,
that
yeah.
everywhere.
I mean, I'm happy with, you know, if and I'm real good about, because I know that his staff reads the messages, right, and says, hey, you need to do this one and we can do that one. And so I will put in there critical question or, you know, whatever, so then they can prioritize it, right? But yeah, I mean, he responds really, really well. And I love him for it. The ones that I hate are the people who don't even look at my chart, and they
Mm.
come in and they're going to diagnose me, and I'm like, oh no, you need to understand I'm a really complicated case. You know, and I had to see a new urologist, and I said, you know, she said, what brings you here? I said, well, I have kidney stones. And she looked at me now, you know, and like, but you're not writhing on the ground, right? And I said, you know, she said, well, no, I don't think so. And I said, oh, no, I had an ultrasound. I know I have kidney stones.
Mhm.
And she still was a little bit befuddled. And she and I kind of went back and forth for a little bit. And then she finally says, what is it that you want me to do? Which was the best question she could have
Yeah. I was like,
asked.
at least she did that, right?
Yes. And I said, I want you to order a more detailed ultrasound and then we'll go from there. Which is what she did. And they went, oh, ew, boulders, ick. You know, but I think that's the other thing, is sometimes our medical care teams don't want to admit they don't know what's going on
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And then there's those of us who are basically taught not to question authority.
right.
So if you
Oh
have all
yeah.
this authority in them,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's very nuanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's no just one easy,
Right.
but when you have a team of
Mm-hmm.
support,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can build that team up,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's your caregivers and your
Mm-hmm.
loved ones or, you know, colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
or you hire a
Mm-hmm.
coach to come in or an
Mm-hmm.
advocate to come in,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's just a lot
Mm-hmm.
of there's just a lot to be said for
Right.
having people
Right.
in your corner.
Well, and ultimately, and you've mentioned this, your care will be better
Yeah.
because you're better educated. You know, and you know, somebody might have caught the fact that, I mean, I like one of the pills that my mother-in-law took one time, you weren't supposed to eat grapefruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nowhere did it say that, but somebody happened to hear a doctor say that. We were like, oh, wait a minute.
Wait a
You
minute.
know,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's, you know, and then when we take better care of ourselves by going to the doctor when we should, by saying, hey, there's an issue, all of those things, then if there is a recurrence, Hopefully it's going to be easier to treat, faster to treat. I mean, all of those various things. Yeah. And we shouldn't be afraid of those white coats. Those white coats are there to help us, but those white coats do not read minds.
That's right. That is right. Yeah.
Well, oh my gosh, Kara, this has been so much. And we didn't even talk about how you used AI as
Oh my
part
goodness.
of this
I feel
process.
like we could just talk for hours and hours, but it is just 1 hour. So
yes, it is. Well, we could call it the business power hours, but people would, and because that's also been a big thing. And so I'll have you on again to talk about this because I think that's so interesting. I mean, like you've used it to create the programs. I use it to create my materials. Part of me feels like I've gotten lazy, but I know I'm writing a good prompt, right? And all of these things. And so I'm getting good outcome that I probably could have come up with on my own, but it could have taken days, hours, weeks, or I might have never got it. And AI went boogity boogity, and there it was.
And there it was.
Yeah. And so in fact, you did that. You sent me like 3 pages worth of, hey, I put this into AI, and here's what it said.
Yeah, here you do.
Yeah. And so we'll have you on again. Maybe once I get a little bit further in the program, and or in the process of being the coach.
Yeah.
And do that. But but I really want you to tell everybody more about Cancer Wellness Institute and what are the programs and services that you provide.
Yes. So Cancer Wellness Institute is a coaching curriculum provider for people who are interested in being cancer coaches, whether you are a survivor, wounded healer coming into that work through your lived experience, or if you are an existing health or life coach looking for continuing education and wanting to work in this industry, which is huge and in demand. So you can find us at cancerwellnessinstitute.com. And all of our programs are provided there. Again, we do provide asynchronous online coaching courses, but also we'll be providing in-person options as well.
I love it. And I might have to go to those in person just to go.
You should just pop by.
Yeah. So, so I can't wait to hear more about that. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously not for everyone. I mean, I think that's part of why it is such a small but growing field is, but even if you're just interested, look at the information because it's great information that you provide. So check that out. And then you do have, tell us just a little bit about Going Beyond the Pink.
Yes. So Going Beyond the Pink is a breast cancer support nonprofit. We operate out of the Wilmington, North Carolina area, but we do have programs online, Pink Squad and online education portals and things like that anyone can benefit from. And you can find us at goingbeyondthepink.org. And if you're fast enough and in the area, we do have a lot of amazing programming coming up in the spring and the fall.
Cool. I love it. Well, Kara, this really has been so much fun, and I've loved talking with you about this. Until we talk with you again, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yes. So there is a song by Chris Stapleton called Starting Over. And there is a line from that song that just resonates so much with me, and I think with other entrepreneurs out there, that nobody wins afraid of losing.
I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a wonderful conversation with Kara Kenan of the Cancer Wellness Institute. Stay tuned for updates on what we're both doing. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.